Hello, hello, hello. Today I'm talking with Vinnie Gill. We talked about how she loves teaching and educating people and why she writes stuff down. I'm Emmanuel from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, hello everyone, and hello with me I have Vinny. Is that how I should pronounce your name?
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely. Well, and Vinny, before we start, let's also show a little bit on where you are and where I am. So here we can see that I'm in Ghent in Belgium, and there's actually two possibilities for you. From what I understand, you're
Yes,
now in Florence, if I'm correct.
this is correct.
And so that is Italy. And for the people who want to know a little more, there is actually also the option that you sometimes are in Edinburgh. That's a little bit the two different locations. And again, I don't want to show, like I said already many times, I don't want to show people exact locations because we don't want to give stalkers the opportunity to go too much into detail. But it's already nice that we learn that you actually try to divide your time into two locations. So before we start into the questions, how do you want what do you want people to know about you? Who are you? Yeah, what's a good introduction for yourself?
Yeah, it's always not so easy when you have to introduce yourself, don't you? I
I
think,
agree, but if I do it, it feels even more awkward because then it's based on whatever I find on the internet. So that's why I ask people to introduce yourself.
all right. So hi, I'm Vinny. I've been working for over 20 years, I guess. And 13 of that is actually in Agile, and I had a life before Agile, and hopefully in our conversation together, we will find out a bit more about it. I've worked with over 100 teams, leaders globally as well. I've trained over 800 people in product services delivery, and my efforts working with teams and leaders have helped companies, maybe save money. I wouldn't say maybe, we definitely have saved money, reduce cycle time, lead time, eliminate waste, and all those good things. In terms of sectors, I've worked globally in mining, engineering, retail, education, automotive, security, government, energy, oil and gas, financial services as well. I'm active in the community, and I speak at conferences regularly as well.
Yeah, like most of us, we have a life before Agile as well. That's
Yeah.
very logical. So, but it's nice that you stress that out. And probably we'll understand or we'll learn some about that, or maybe not. We'll see. So let's move to that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
I guess this may be obvious or it may not be obvious, but I have lived and worked in different places. I have grown up in a different country, and I've lived in a different country, and I've grown up in two countries as well. I guess one of the things that I don't really like is people always asking where I'm from or where I'm really, really from. I think as people, we always want to compartmentalize people and to fit them into boxes, and that's okay if it comes from a position where you really want to understand someone or you're really curious. But I've also had situations where and this one incident in Australia where my husband was buying eggs from someone that had a sign, fresh eggs available. Yeah, it still happens there. And I was just with my dog, and I was just waiting outside, and he was taking a really long time. So I was wondering if he was okay. So I just walked up and I just stood behind him. And immediately that lady just looked at me and she's like, "Where are you from?" And just immediately. And I got a lot of that in Australia. And for me, I guess the older I am, what I've come to realize is we don't fit in places, we fit in people and in communities.
And so for somehow, if people around you feel you don't fit in the environment, then they start asking these kind of strange questions. And what I'm understanding is that if you're in an environment where the people feel like, hey, you fit in our group of in our community, you get less asked these kind of questions or no longer ask these kind of questions. Is that a correct statement?
I guess if they can peg where you're from or if you sound where you're from,
Mhm.
I think it for somebody in their mind it makes sense. But if you say you're from here, you don't look where you're from here. If you sound from where you're here, then it gets, people start asking questions. And I understand if people ask questions. I mean, I am from, from the UK, from Scotland, and we typically talk about the weather. We don't immediately ask personal questions. And it just sometimes gets it does get a bit too much if it is kind of like a busybody thing. But I also understand that people are also interested, and so I guess to answer your question, you said how has that influenced me, and being, and not just traveling but actually living, working, spending your life in different countries, it does help shape you. It does help influence you, in your thoughts, your life, your emotions, your empathy, what is fair, what is right, what is just, how you think creatively, innovatively. It just, even food, what you eat, how you behave, it just adds to a lot of you, I guess.
Same time, because you moved around in many places and lived in many places, it's probably even harder for people to track where you're from because they can't get an accent, because you probably even your language might be a little bit different because you've moved and lived in so many places. Is that also part of why they ask more these questions, or does it happen less? I'm trying to guess a little bit when how, because I've never really had experienced that, but of course, most of my life I only lived in Belgium, just with the one exception for a year. So that I don't have that kind of experience. So I'm trying to find out a little bit where that what's happening there.
Yeah, I guess, my mom, she specializes teaching English to non-native speakers. So we're always
Mm.
taught to speak. So I was always taught to speak clearly and to pronounce my words and enunciate them properly. At some point in my life, I did have an American accent. I quite possibly lost it, but my mom also studied. She did a couple of years in America for her high school. I've also watched a lot of American TV as well growing up. So I guess what I would say about my accent is I can actually mirror the local accent and the way they speak. And I do that quite naturally. And most of the time, I do that without even knowing that I'm doing that. And I think that makes the other person feel quite comfortable as well. And it helps me actually assimilate better.
Does that also happen in a conversation where you're like with people from different kind of origins and you swap your or change your language in the same conversation depending on who you're talking to, or is that less happening?
Uh, I guess it can happen. I do it subconsciously sometimes. I don't even realize that I may be doing it. But I always try and speak clearly, and I try to, make sure that I can be understood. I guess that's the best way to put it. I know with some people, the accent can get quite heavy, and living and working in, different places, you tend to adjust yourself, and it's easier to be to be understood.
How that has indeed influenced you in who you are. That's definitely a really wonderful answer to this. And I can at the same time imagine that many people relate to it, and at the same time think that people who have not had the experience have a hard time trying to understand some of these things. So, wonderful answer that really helps me understand people like you much better. So thank you for sharing this. Let's move to that second question. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, do you have any idea what could have become of you?
I know your original question was, if I was not from IT, what would have
Right.
become of me? But I also like that question, if I haven't been doing what I've been doing. So I am different. I did things the other way around. I know a lot of people in our industry, they come from IT. I'm not from IT. I come from a business background, HR, startups, finance, strategy, the actual business components, to do that. And then at that point, I actually found agile ways of working, quite surprisingly, quite suddenly. And 13 years ago, it was only in IT that people were actually in agile. And I decided at that point to make that change after 10 years. And I guess if I, so there's two ways to answer that question. Like, I guess if I didn't find agile ways of working, I maybe would be doing something else, right? I would have continued in, project portfolio. I might have even gone into HR. I love work around strategy, but they're all actually related. And I don't know if your question is, if I was not doing this, then what would I have wanted to be, as a child? What was my dream ambition? So there's also two ways to answer that.
Well, I am purposely don't try to define it too much, and indeed, I changed it quite quickly after I've started working with this question. Like a lot of people are not by definition in IT or don't see themselves into IT, so I moved it more to what you've been doing now, which I think is much more open. And like you rightly guessed, many people talk about what happened in their youth, where they were dreaming of this or that, but for some people it's something completely different. So I leave it completely up to you what you feel most logical in answering.
Yeah, I guess that, at that point of my life 13 years ago, if I wanted to be in this industry, I had to go to IT. And so I learned IT, and everything I did was actually opposite, the other way. And that's why now in the last few years, business agility has become a thing that makes me really happy, because that was my thing. That was my specialist thing. To answer your question, what would I have been when I was younger? I I didn't really talk about this a lot because I was quite I didn't really get to be that. But I suppose looking back, I'm quite glad that that wasn't what I became. As a child, you say, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" and things like that. You don't really consider a lot of things. You don't consider your lifestyle. You don't really think about things. And I actually wanted to be a pilot, and I've never really said this out loud because I was extremely upset at that point when I applied to go to flying school, and they said that this was only for men.
This is recently, because you're still rather young. I mean, I'm
Good
always,
genes.
yeah, but that's it's like I'm always confused. Like, for example, my mother, when she had me, so after I was born, she was still not allowed to have a bank account, and that's like, wow, that's so little time ago, and now you're talking about even earlier. or less time ago that you're not allowed to fly. That you wow. And is there, of course, probably not. But was there any explanation why this is only for men? Is
Well,
this
it was 25 years ago, must have been more than 25 years ago. And I have, I don't know why. At that point, I tried to pick up the phone. Those were the days you picked up the phone and dialed. And I'm a pretty determined person. And basically, they were saying, we're only taking males in, and we, maybe don't have the facilities for female, and maybe if you do, you'll have to go and get it done privately. Obviously, it cost a lot, and there was no way I was going to do it privately. I wanted an airline to, yeah, to sponsor me.
just
And
like they do with the men? I mean,
yeah,
that's yeah.
and I was quite upset because I guess when I was 14, I remember my aunt pulling me aside and she said, you need to forget about this. You need to get this out of your head. And I was even more determined to make it happen because
Wow.
somebody told me no.
Somebody rather close to you. I mean,
Yes, instead of
family.
encouraging me, said to me no. And I'm not sure if this person actually remembers that, people do things all the time that they don't remember that they do, but they
Mhm.
did do that. And I do remember it until today. And, quite suddenly I just, studied what I studied. I'm quite happy with how things have turned out. I know the first 2 years it was very painful. I couldn't even like walk near an airplane. I used to get so upset. Um, because I actually took my first flight when I was about 4, alone. Not alone. I mean, alone as in a young passenger traveling alone. And so I love planes. I guess without any family member, you get assigned a cabin crew, and they will take you, and you have this little badge, and you get to sit right in front. And so I've always been going to the cockpit because when you're young and you're traveling alone and you do that quite a lot. You can ask those days you could just go to the cockpit. You
Yep.
you could just do that. And I remember at one point I was doing a really long haul flight, and I was transiting in Heathrow. And they kept me in this special room with some ground staff, and they were looking at my little book that had all the miles that I had done. And I was basically saying, oh, what do you get when you get to this x miles that you have flown, because you get little stickers and things like that. And the staff actually joked, and they say, oh, well, you get to sit on the pilot's lap. And they just looked at each other and they laughed. and, and I know if saying something like this today in this day and age would not be
You
okay.
feel
It's
okay.
not okay. It's not okay to say that. But and I don't think they even knew that I was even listening in, or listening in
Mhm.
properly. But there's certain incidents that I do remember. But looking back, I'm glad, because I don't think I would have enjoyed a job where I just sat down on the chair.
Okay, that's what it. You can't move at all. You're in a
Yeah.
chair.
Yeah.
Okay, you can walk a little bit, but most of the time you're sitting. I think even other personnel in a plane is moving much more than the pilot and the co-pilot.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a good thing. But that would have been a much more interesting conversation to have with your family member, to think like, okay, what do you like about planes? Do you know that then you have to sit still and everything? That would be an interesting conversation. And now it was basically like,
Mm.
forget it, don't even think about that.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah, exactly. And I guess it's only now that when you work, when you're a desk worker, when you're a child, these things, they don't make sense. And when you're a desk worker and you sit down all the time and you get tight muscles everywhere, and it's also as you age, the aches and pains, they start coming in. And I think it was a couple of weeks ago that I was saying uh, to my husband, and I said, oh, well, thank God I didn't become a pilot. Like, I'm already in so much pain, I'm like doing stretches and things like that. Even in the office, I would just be doing stretches and make sure I'm walking around, getting my glass of water. So I guess in hindsight,
Was
the
the right
approach was
choice.
not right, but in the end of the day, I really think it worked out.
Right. I can definitely see that. But that's indeed, again, um, it's one of these things that when you ask children what you want to become, pilot is sometimes some things that people say, but most of these children have never flown with you. You had been around planes, you have so much experience even as a young child, so you know what it is to be in planes all the time. You know what it is to travel and to be in international environment. So that is much. It feels much more real than just a small child saying, "Hey, I want to become a pilot because it looks cool on TV or whatever." No, you actually know how this works. That's wonderful. So yeah, I do understand the frustration with that family member or with other people that said you're not allowed to do. But all in all, in the end, I think we can say it worked for the best. That's what I'm hearing. So let's move to that new question. The next question: what do you consider at this moment your biggest challenge, at least the one that you want to share openly on the internet, and why is that a good thing for you?
I believe my biggest challenge is not only my challenge.
Hmm.
I believe it is our challenge. And
Say
the
more.
sorry.
Say more. I mean, because yeah, many challenges that people mention here are indeed. This is for me one of the reasons to ask that question because a lot of us we share the same challenges, but we also don't always realize that we're not alone. Sometimes it's good to hear. So now I'm even more intrigued to know what do you consider your challenge and yeah, why do you think you're not alone?
So this challenge is something that I believe we have been facing for a few years already. And I believe it's the understanding of agility and also the understanding of the value that an agile person or an agilist can bring. And it was hard enough even during the good times to actually carve out a niche, to actually do the good work, to actually find a problem and solve it. And be it you're improving culture, you're improving you're improving profits, or you're working on things that are important. It was hard enough then to do it then, and now it's even more difficult. And what we've obviously ended up with is in terms of transformation. I don't really like that word. I prefer growth or evolution. Is we've ended up with a bunch and series of cut, copy, and paste. And without actually realizing the decision makers have made this decision without actually wanting to speak to anybody or even understand, having these decisions imposed on people and disturbing their lives, changing their job roles, their job titles. You ask what people want to be when they grow up. And it's just basically rebranding and rebadging. And it's quite upsetting because wherever I work, I do have a very close relationship with the people, the teams, the leaders that I work with. And a lot of them didn't make this choice. And it's really unfair, I feel. Sometimes people lose their jobs, and it upsets me because then it doesn't work. And then someone else comes and they want their thing, and then it's their thing. And what happens is transformation fatigue over and over again. So if you look at somebody, and let's just call that person Joe in a company, and Joe's been in the company for, let's say, 15 years, how many transformations has Joe been through? And this actually takes time instead of, doing work. So I hope I'm not alone in this challenge.
definitely recognize it. And when you say about people who've been, and sometimes when we come in as facilitators, change agents, whatever we call it, um, we might think, yeah, we have a solution for where you are. But it took me at least a couple of years to realize that this is, and maybe in the beginning it was one of the first transitions, but still now. In many cases, there have been a lot of. There might not have been agile transitions, but there might be others, because if it's a large corporation or a bank or an insurance company that exists for, I don't know, 50 or more than 100 years, of course they have been through many things. But for the people who working there, sometimes it feel like, yeah, okay, now if it's you or Vinny, it's you, but then next time it's Joe or it's Peter or whatever, and it's the something else changes, and by the time you're gone, but they have to stay and feel other kind of changes. So definitely something that is really important. And I think it is good that you bring it up, because well, it took me a while as facilitator to realize that. And of course, maybe 20 years ago, I was more working in smaller companies where there have been less changes, but the bigger, how would I say, the bigger the companies are, the more changes that have been before an agile transition. And then I'm only talking one agile transition, and sometimes, yeah, we all know that sometimes they do two or three with different kind of things, because they, like you nicely said, they want to copy one model and then they try to copy another model instead of growing their own model, what they actually would need more. So that's definitely a challenge. And so if we talk about that second part of that question, what is so good for you about that challenge? What do you learn from that? Is there anything good about that challenge?
It is actually a lot good, because I feel I'm able to educate and teach people. When I do teach, I coach in the trenches as well, and I also teach. And I love doing that, because I feel like everything starts with education. It's actually, about the why, and educating people about that. And it's I feel like if the more of us do this, and the more of us say, hey, it's not about framework, it's not about this, it's not about that, it's not about the events, it's about finding a problem. What is your problem, and focusing on that, and let's see how we can do better. And that's so much more easier, so much more nicer, so much more respectful to the people that you work with. A lot, like I said, a lot of them did not actually ask for it. It's a nice challenge, because at the moment I've started a joint venture with my friend Suzanne Morrison, and we've started something that's called outcome over output. And there's a reason why we call our business outcome over output. It's not a concept that we made up. It's a lot of people talk about this concept, but so much that what you see in the agile world, or just in the world, is to optimize delivery of everything at the team level, with no regard of what's being developed, right? They tend to just want a one size fits all. I think it's going to solve your problems. And I feel if we just strip it back to the basics and make it about, are the people happy? Are they achieving? Are we in profit so that we can survive? If we just keep it nice and simple, I think eventually we will get there. So I do have this message where I feel, we should be solving business problems. We should not be going in like, ruffling feathers immediately. I always feel that change should be done respectfully. It should not be managed. And we should always be doing change with people and not to people.
Brings me back to what you said earlier about the copying, and what I made then linked it to, like, if you do it with the people, there is no copying. You have to create it together. It's impossible to create something with people by just copying. There might be copying of pieces, but then at least the people might select the pieces that we want to copy and look for, because we don't have to reinvent everything, but at least we can learn a bit, like, okay, that's a part, and that's definitely something. And when you say we want to have that output there, is that when you talk to business leaders, do they understand the whole concept, everything behind what you're talking, or is that also a struggle?
It does take time, and sometimes people want to, and sometimes they don't want to, and sometimes they're not ready, and that's okay. I always believe that we meet people where they are, and you try and speak their language. And I spent a lot of time building relationships with people, and I also spent a lot of time cultivating and keeping those relationships. I've been a contractor. I've worked for myself for 10 years. In January will be my 10th year. And every single client that I've been on, I always have one person there that I know and I'm still in touch. Firstly, because we've formed really good friendships, and doesn't matter where they are in the world. I'm always really good at keeping in touch with people, and I really want to. And the second thing I think is for learning. It's not only for my learning, it's for our learning as well. What has happened to them in these years? Where are they at? They may be at the same company, they may not be at the same company, they may have a different job role. I believe, for that, it's just really important for everybody's learnings and to see what has happened. So sort of like that lessons learned.
You recognize a lot of what you're saying there, and just like you said before, probably you're not, well, I know that I'm definitely joining you in these kind of challenges and the way to treat with it. And I'm guess, well, it's not just guessing, I know at least a couple of other people, and I guess there might be even more people indeed that trying to do it in the similar kind of things. And I do sometimes see that well, let's say that some corporations are attracted by people or look at people that do promise the copy pasting, and then it's and they keep, well, it's not just the copy pasting, but it's by, if you do the copy pasting, it's done much quicker, and then in 6 months everything is done. It's like, no, a change of that has an impact on the way we work, the way we think, the way, well, a lot of that takes a lot more than just copy pasting, and takes typically longer time.
Yeah.
So I've noticed that sometimes that we have to, or at least I have to compete with people who are making false promises. Is that something that you recognize as well, or do you have any ways to work around that? How does that work for you?
I guess I or we definitely recognize that's happening, and I can also understand when companies they feel more comfortable with a
Mhm.
framework or with something that they know because that's what they're comfortable with. But agility is doing something that you're not comfortable with, so I'm going to give you something else that I may not even have the answer up front, right? I need to talk to people, meet people, experiment with people, and see things that maybe you didn't see or I saw it. It is different, but sometimes I believe again we meet them where they're at, what they're comfortable with. If this makes them comfortable, then it's okay to start there. But then once you're in, you build relationships, you get them to trust you, they understand you, and then slowly remove the training wheels, I guess. I mean, fundamentally, even today in these days and ages, I always say it's about delivering and delivering the right thing, because profit, money, that impacts, right? Because if we don't profit, then how are we all going to be in a job? But at the same time, you need to look after your people as well, so there needs to be a balance between these two. So I guess in the end of the day, I educate them, I tell them, I give them options, I give examples from what I've done, and I say, this is what this is. These are the choices. These are the options. What do you think? And I always can show metrics from the past jobs that I've done. I'm able to show metrics. I'm able to show where they're at. And you know how I said I always keep in touch with people. So I can also actually say this company 8 years ago, this is where they're at. 5 years ago, this is where they're at now. This is what's going on now. But that to say this is not you. You are different. You're different people. Your people are different. You're a different leader. Your industry is different. You're probably in a different country. Your sector is also different. But it sometimes helps people just giving an idea of what it's like. And I guess, you know, in the end of the day, it's their transformation, it's their change journey. And it's up to them to decide what they want. And sometimes without realizing, it's the way that they've been incentivized as well. Sometimes we forget that they are being incentivized in ways that only they can understand. So even the incentivization of how their KPIs or their goals or whatever you may want to call it, OKRs, how it's written, is written still in traditional ways. And this is why it makes me really happy to know that, you know, business agility now is becoming big, because that's where I came from. And I understand that, and I speak the language that these people speak.
It feels kind of you came from there, you kind of moved gradually into IT, and now IT with you is moving back to the business agility. That's a little bit what I'm hearing. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, that is correct. I'm definitely I wouldn't call myself, you know, technical as, you know, the developers and people that have things, but you know, I understand the basics. I've written a children's program, you know, and that's how far Harvard is. So I've seen this happen in the last 13 years, and I know businesses are adopting this now. So I guess I'm pretty unique, and I'm in a unique situation where I have the business knowledge, but I've also have that 13 years of seeing what has happened in the IT and the evolution of it.
Yeah, recognize a lot of these things. So yeah, thanks for sharing these. Let's move to that next question, because for me, well, I think, and I have this with many guests, but I have the same feeling here with you. You're very passionate. You bring that story in a very passionate way. So I'm really interested in what drives you. Where does that passion come from? For example, is that something you already had when you're very young? Is that something you've discovered? Well, yeah.
I guess I hope this doesn't come out wrong, but I actually like working. I love working. I love the work I do. I don't work 12 hours a day. You know, I know where to draw the limit and where to draw the line. But I feel very happy and excited, you know, when I have purposeful work to do, or, you know, when I'm hired, when people actually trust me, and, you know, they said, okay, I can solve the problems and I can bring tangible results, you know, that's going to be, you know, impacting the bottom line, or seeing people being treated better, where I feel both companies and employees can feel that they're doing a little bit better by breaking down the barriers, right? So, you know, moving towards less command and control, and also, you know, when you see that happening, and I now know how to count my small wins. You know, in when I was young, I always wanted things fast and quick, and I guess a lot of that was from my first 10 years of working. You know, just very different, and I had to go through that whole unlearning thing myself. So I feel very authentic when I actually can speak to businesses because I went through that change myself as well. So when I see people, they're utilized fully in ways that can benefit the company, or even I'm utilized in a way that's full, that can benefit the company. And if I see that happening, then that makes me really, really happy.
When you say utilized, you use that in a positive way, yeah. The
In a
you
positive way, you know, your talents being realized. Like it's
Exactly. That's the wording I was looking for. It's not
yeah,
like they abuse you, but they
no,
use you with your full capacity, with all the talents, not just, oh, we use this little part and there is another part of Vinny that's also there, but we ignore it because no, what you're talking about, we utilizing or using the full talent. That's what I'm hearing, correct?
Yes, yes. And a lot of the times when I work, companies tend to, because of the way, the job roles written, and the careers, they think it's linear, or careers are not linear anymore. Some person may come with a lot of talents. For example, you and me, you have your podcast show, I have the banter show. That's extra stuff that we come and we bring to whoever. That's creativity. That actually helps me go into companies and create mini podcasts in their company, shows, or interview people and make them engaging. So similar to that, the people that I've worked with, they've also have a background that they have done other things in the past. And I really like it when I actually can highlight that talent of theirs, and the company actually says, oh, I think you do this, or I think you do that. That brings a smile to my face.
Yeah, I recognize that fully. That's the same thing. I've had companies that they said, "Well, when you do things for the community, we don't like because you have less energy for this." I'm like, "No, it's actually the opposite." And there's other companies when this who's agile, there used to be a book version, and in one of the companies I've worked with, we created an internal version that we did with in the booklet form, an ebook
Uh-huh.
with the consultants who were there, and it was really wonderful way to get to know each other based on similar kind of questions. And yeah, so for me that really felt like, yeah, very logical to do that. And like you say, some companies, they support you in these things, and some other things that it takes energy. And for me it's the, yeah, the complete opposite. It's bringing that energy, what I'm learning today, I will use, well, maybe not for the rest of my life, but I will use in the next coming weeks and days, because that's how the energy is spread, I would say, and that's how I actually work. So I
Yeah,
recognize a lot what you say there.
yeah. And
Um,
I guess the other work that's currently driving me is my work with the Scottish Digital Academy, the Scottish government. I've actually worked in government across 3 different countries, and I'm really excited. I have such a lovely team. Along my friend Suzanne, there's I just want to shout out to Dean, Jamie, and Jonah. And government, I find really interesting, because in government, when you look at services, it's not really a want, it's a need. People need the services, they rely on services. So I'm quite passionate about that. And I always feel when government wins, we all win, right? If and I'm able to bring those examples in all the different countries that I've worked with. For example, some countries moving towards more digital driving license. You know, I think it was the ex-digital minister of New South Wales, and he said, his vision was just with a phone, that you can walk out of your house with just a phone, and everything is in the phone. And now it's moving towards, digital passports, and even in the UK, you can take your own photo. You can stand at the back of a white background. You can take your own photo using your phone, and you can just load it, and it will say, do we accept it or do we not accept it? And these were like 4 or 5 years ago. So things are really changing, and we're making things really easy for people. But at the same time, we don't want to lose the human connection or the human touch. There are some people, they still want to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, and they still need help. So it's like finding that balance. So
Yeah, I've been involved in the discussion on LinkedIn the last couple of days about not picking up the phone. Picking up the phone was like, yeah, because that person said like, okay, I don't like to be called, and I turn off my or I put a special message on my voicemail that don't call me, text me, and there was a lot of people. Yeah, you don't have to tell me what to do. It's like, no, he was just saying, this is working for me, and it might work for other people, and yeah, and indeed sometimes things work better over the phone, but for some conversations it actually works better, and for some people it works better in different kind of ways. And it's not like, oh, for me, a one size fits all. It's about finding out that balance, what works for many people, and or having multiple options. I really.
Absolutely. What I don't want to see in this day and age is, people lining up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning when it's cold, taking a number and queuing up. That's not right. That's no way to treat people.
Well, yeah, that's what I've seen also in Belgium. At some point, it was that way to do with finding a school for your children, and then what you saw is that the people who were having the most decent jobs, they could take a holiday to even sit 3 4 days waiting at school, and they actually had friends and family members joining in, helping out to take a little bit. And then you had other people who were trying to get around with having 2 3 different jobs, and of course they couldn't do, and they ended up with having their children to the worst schools that there were because there's no other options. And so, yeah, but anyone can sit there in time. No, not anyone. It really depends a little bit on how your life is and what else is going on in your life. And even if you have even if you have a decent job, but maybe you're a pilot, like you say, you're all the time out of the country, you can't do it. Or maybe you have a small child and you can't afford to stay at night so the more we go for digital, at the same time, there are people who have trouble with doing things digital. But if half of the people, or maybe 80% of the people, are doing it digital, well, then there is more time for the 20 other percent to do it manually and go into do things. So I think, yeah, for me, diversity works in this kind of ways in helping out. And especially, I'm a big fan of doing a lot more digital, because indeed I can do it in my time. I can do it in the evening. If I'm at a conference and I still need to schedule, I literally had what was it? A parent teacher conversation with for one of my children, and I was sitting in the airport, and it was not the perfect place, but it was that or not being able, because that was only that evening, and I knew at that evening I would be at the airport. It's like, okay, I can arrange something when my flight is not going, and otherwise the option would be, let's not have a conversation.
Yeah.
Because so for me, doing things digitally, unfortunately, this year the school decided, or that teacher from that my daughter's class decided, you can only do it in person. It works better. Well, no, because I'm not in Belgium at the moment that you're trying to do it. So sorry, it's not possible. And if you would have done the same day or the same week, another day for the few people who don't do it, that still is better. And
Mm.
so in the end result, it was like, okay, then you're out of luck, so don't do it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, but okay. And then it looks like I'm not, how do you call it? I'm not an engaged parent, where it's like, no, I am. I really want to do it, but I need to have an option that works. So that I find it very strange that people don't give options. And I don't want to blame that teacher, because there's other things going on there that I might not know, but it's the options that I think are important. Is that similar for you? Because I'm not babbling a lot, but I
No,
know
no.
I think you recognize that.
What you said really made me to think about a few other things about people who are disabled. We always assume everybody lives like us. We always assume everybody is like us. And you aptly pointed out that, we all have very different lives. Some people may travel for work, some people may do this, and some people may do that. I mean, I have a friend who is living in another country because they can't get work in their country, and they have and they, I don't want to say left, but their wife and kids are in the home country. So having things like what you said, being able to video call on a PTA meeting, will make people feel more inclusive. And I like that about options. I always believe in giving options. So thank you for sharing your story. It's very valid.
the option. So I think feel very connected on these kind of things. So let's move to that next question. What do you consider your biggest achievement? Well, at least the biggest achievement so far, because there's pretty possibility to have more achievements. But before I jump into that question, what I've noticed over the 3 years that I'm doing this podcast is that um, basically this is your option to the moment to brag and to be really proud. And I've noticed that it's not always easy for people to brag and to be really proud. Is it easy for you to be proud and to brag about a big achievement, or is that hard for you?
It wasn't easy initially, but I think I'm getting a bit better. And I wouldn't say bragging, but I think I'm getting a lot better at showing my work and showing what I have done, I guess. So I have two biggest achievements. One is in
Wow.
my personal life, and one is in my, I would say, professional life.
Let's see if I can.
Thank you, thank you. I think it's the same with a lot of people, right? They all have, you have your personal life, and then you have your professional life,
Exactly.
and the aims are different, and the goals are maybe different as well. So it just depends on where you are. I guess my biggest achievement in terms of in my professional career is, if you look at me on LinkedIn, I carry the titles Chartered FCIPD, so it's Chartered Fellow of the CIPD in UK,
Hmm.
and that is a professional title that I can and I am allowed to use behind my name.
And what does it mean? What does that achievement mean? Because I'm not familiar with this. Could you
Okay.
say some more about that?
So basically, it's when have you heard of a chartered accountant or something like that? Have you heard of a chartered engineer, maybe?
I think I know what it is, but I'm not sure, and I'm definitely sure that many people might not know. So
Okay.
what does that mean?
Hopefully I'll like explain it in a way that's simple and easy to understand. But when you are chartered, it means you are deemed an expert in that field, not only through knowledge but through competence as well. So the CIPD is Institute of Personnel Development, and it's in the UK, and it has a royal charter. They're all around the world, but the main hub is in the UK. And remember how I said I started from HR and from people, and obviously a lot of the work we do is in the people space. So both those lives have actually merged. Even though I started in HR, I went on to do full-on projects, contracts, portfolios, and that I did in the industry of mining and civil engineering. That was my industry in the first 10 years. It was a hard industry, not a hard, difficult, but like it's those hard industries, like metal and steel and things like that. So with the CIPD, this was 20 years in the making. So first I had to get chartered. So I set myself that goal. I had a mentor, and and he was actually the director of the company, and he was big into education. He was a chartered engineer himself, and he said, took me for a one-on-one, and he said, let's just think about your career and how this is going to look like. And I'm very grateful for that, because he gave me the choices, the option. I don't think this would have been a pure coaching conversation, because you don't know what you don't know that is out there. And he said, I think we should have you working towards something. And he said, this is the CIPD. They're really good chartered institutes, because, there's some better ones to be a part of. And this is really difficult. And this will be something that will give you a goal to work towards. And so, we looked at what it takes to be chartered initially, and you have to be an associate member. And that was how it started, and it wasn't easy, because for the first when we decided about that, I had to prove competence in my job role via a professional assessment, and I also had to write a management research report, and then followed by an oral examination. So all my work evidence had to be work products and work related things. And so I had to get one pass, and one of the components was learning and development. And this is why I can write training courses and I can do all of that. And then there was other components, like leadership and people and all those components. And then I had to be professionally interviewed. I ended up with a folder this thick because, those were the days where you would photocopy everything and file everything. And even for that, I actually had a mentor helping me towards getting that. And I still remember the research paper that I wrote. It says, knowledge does not prove competence, a study done amongst civil engineers in Scotland, because that was my industry and I could gather data. So after that, I got chartered. And then in the next 10 years, I decided to become a fellow. And obviously, I changed job roles and I'd gone and, into the agile industry and the agile world, which I'm so passionate about. And I guess about a few years ago, I applied to become a fellow. And I was a bit worried because I'm coming from a non-traditional route, because it's HR. Usually they have their HR business partner and HR manager, and they have all their tiers, and I was coming from that. But I also know that transformation was also starting to sit in HR. So that was a really good moment for me. And during my interview, I had to compile assessments of work, evidence, products, but also metrics. And good for me that I always been collecting metrics. I always measure at the start where we're at, where we want to be. This is something, when I do experiments, I always make sure that I do that. And I gave examples. For example, in the growth space, the transformation space, by enabling agility in the enterprise, in leadership, by working with leaders, new ways of working, working with cultures, structures, org design, even like improvements in the talent acquisition space, and also the remuneration and the performance. How do we incentivize teams? We want them to work in this way, but then we're still incentivizing individuals. How moving from KPIs, OKRs, and then all the learning and development work that I've done, and even the part about cultivating psychological safety, building high performance teams. And I worked really hard to compile that, and so with that, I got accredited and they accepted me, and I had a 3-hour interview as well. I think it was between 2 to 3 hours. And so now I have,
Wow.
yeah. So now I'm a chartered fellow, and I'm quite proud of this. But also there is a bit of a story. When I moved back from Australia, I was in Australia for 8 years, and I moved back to Europe. And it was a bit difficult because people don't know you and you want to work for yourself, and a lot of people have this network, and I was applying for contract roles, and somebody's told me, I think you should take out those letters behind your name. I think it's a bit intimidating. And I said, you've got all your certs behind your name, and that's just certs. You can't use it. I can use it. It says on my certificate that I carry these titles and I can use it behind my name. And I thought that was a bit funny, but it was a bit strange. But nevertheless, I did think about it. And I was in South Africa at an Agile conference at that point. I was pondering upon this. Clearly, it was really impacting me, thinking, oh, could those titles actually be intimidating people? And I spoke to somebody, and he said, Vinnie, do not do that. You earned it fair and square. It's 20 years. You didn't just get it. You've proved competence. You didn't just take an exam. And so that's my story. Sorry, it's a bit long.
that's just one of the stories because there was a personal story as well, or is that intertwined in this?
Uh, I think definitely there is some intertwined. There is some crossovers. I guess my other achievement is I guess I chose my life partner really well, or we chose each other really well. It's my husband. He he's a software developer, and he's the person that actually introduced me to Agile, because he came back from work one day 13 years ago, and he was telling me about this sailboat thing. And he said, "Oh, we did sailboat at work." And I was like, "Oh, really? That's so exciting." I said, "We don't even get to do fun stuff at my work. We just sit in porto cabins and it's so cold and it's freezing." And he explained to me the concept of a retrospective and a sailboat. And at that time, I was part of the senior leadership team. And I said, "We're not having a meeting. We are going to use this sailboat thing." And I believe I still have the photograph of that sailboat. And I walked in. Now, I was a lot younger than everybody else as part of the team. I would say at least 40 years difference between me. But they were very nice, and they always let me try new things, and they were very motivating and encouraging. And I walked in with this board and the boat, I was carrying it in. I didn't know anything, Eves, about how to facilitate or anything. But I did get the sailboat right. I knew the concepts of the sailboat. And I said,
Oh, wait,
we're
wait.
just,
Do I understand that you never participated in a sailboat exercise? Just your husband explained it to you, and then you said, "Oh, I'm going to facilitate
yeah,
it myself," without knowing anything, reading anything. You just had the drawing, and you had the story of your husband talking about it. Is that how I?
yeah.
What?
He explained
Wow.
it to me. He explained it to me. That's a retrospective. He explained it to me, what the anchor, what the boat, what the wind. He explained it to me. But that
But he
actual,
was not a facilitator, right?
sorry?
He was not a facilitator, so he was just a participant.
He,
So he did not know some of the facilitator tricks that were used. He might just experienced it, and because wow, if you're then able to do that, hats off for you because that is not that easy without that much explanation. So,
But I was a horrible facilitator, and that's what I said. I said I got the concepts more or less right,
but
but
the
I
end
wasn't
result
facilitating
worked,
properly. There were so many post-its. If I can find the photo, you can see the whole board, and it was,
right?
this
Too
board that
much.
it was too much, and I didn't know about clustering or anything. But I just knew that those boring meetings needed to not be boring anymore. Just that agenda that just went on and on. And I said, okay, we're just going to have this boat here, and that's what we're going to do. And I think
And but
everybody did have fun with post-its. I knew about the post-its thing.
And so, like you say, everybody had fun. And so, although it wasn't good facilitators, or though there were too much things on it, somehow other people felt that it was valuable, that you could redo it, or how should I see that?
I guess initially they thought, oh, let's humor Vinny. She's come up with one of her ideas again. And I
Mhm.
guess they did. They really liked it. And the other problem that I solved as well, because we were in inquiring in civil engineering, a lot of the people that worked for us, I worked I worked for a consultancy, so we had private clients and government clients, and they were all around. And email uptake was not a big thing at that time. We were phones and emails, that wasn't really a thing. And I introduced the concept of, what we know as daily scrum, or like a daily sync. And we said, okay, let's just talk twice a week, because we don't really come to the office, and we don't get to talk. And let's all just be on this call for like 5 or 10 minutes. And it wasn't about work. It was just basically to say, hi, how are you? What are you doing? Because some of these people, they don't go home for 3 days or 4 days because they're on site. And those were the two things that I did. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't right, but that is actually how I found out about Agile and how I introduced it. I didn't introduce it in a software context.
Definitely see that. But here you are so many times later, years later, and you've learned a lot, I guess, because I assume that when you do a sailboat exercise, you don't have that many post-its anymore, and there are grouped and things like that. Is that a right assumption?
Yes, I would say I got better over the years. Facilitation is something really difficult. It's
Oh
really
yeah.
broad, it's really deep, and I think a lot of people they don't understand how difficult it is in the different structures where you converge, where you diverge, how you design it. It takes a lot of time, and I'm always learning different ways. I wouldn't call myself a really good facilitator. I'm always learning.
Well, for me, this is part of being a good facilitator is not assuming that you know everything and that you have to keep learning. I think that is part. I think the moments I go into a meeting thinking, I've aced it. I've done this sailboat thing hundreds of thousands of times. I know how to deal it, and I don't mentally prepare for it. That definitely is the worst versions of it. That's yeah, it's ego is a very dangerous thing as a facilitator. It's definitely something that is dangerous. So in that sense, and the fact that you were able very quickly to say, "Oh, it wasn't good because this and that was," yeah, that means that you have grown, that you have learned since that first thing. Um, I definitely don't want to look at video. They don't exist. But if there would have been videos from my very first facilitations, I definitely would have probably see a lot of other things. I still remember being part of a retrospective as a developer, and yeah, I totally didn't understand what they were doing. And I was already familiar with the concept of agile, but okay, there was a lot of drama going on in that company, and so there was also brought in facilitators that I now respect a lot, but there was not much explanation of what was going on. But I found it a horrible meeting. I totally didn't understand it, and I think it has to do with the fact that senior management that announced that session never explained the goal of what we're trying to do. And so, yeah, luckily we all learn. I would say that's the good thing.
Do you remember your first retrospective, either maybe you facilitated or maybe that you took part in?
No, not really, because I did well. I do remember a first training on retrospective, but I also know that I had done already some retrospectives, and I do remember this was a training by Rachel Davis and Emmanuel Gaillot that they organized, and and yeah, I immediately realized, hey, this is the things I've done wrong in the past couple of things. So I've learned a lot. By doing that, by being in that training. Um, and yeah, I was familiar with the concept, and I had read the project retrospective books. I hadn't read the agile retrospective books, the second book on retrospectives by that time. But yeah, I've very quickly learned because I realized a lot how good facilitation is crucial for these kind of meetings. Actually, I was already, I would say, not a bad facilitator for workshops and for games and stuff like that. But retros is for me a next level to be careful about safe places, about, okay, do people understand why it's there, and yeah, can they really express what they want? That's really
Yeah.
true.
That's a really good point, like the creation of the safe space and things like that. It goes beyond the post-its, it goes beyond the three questions, it goes beyond the dot voting, right?
That's definitely. Okay, let's move to basically we're talking about agile and ideas on how to improve things. Well, that next question is about a personal agility. Do you have a personal agility tip that you want to share with us?
Yes, it's none other than communication and collaboration over processes and tools.
Hmm.
Please talk to people, pick up the phone, talk, talk. talk. Don't, like sometimes messages and text messages have their time and they have their place. Sometimes picking up a phone call, you can solve a lot of things quicker. The other thing, something that I've realized is usually during my birthday, I always get a lot of phone calls. And as the years have dwindled, they're less and almost non existent. I get a lot of messages.
Right.
I get a lot of messages, I get video messages, I get voice messages. But I think people who know me, and I don't know if my friends outside of the Agile world will be watching this, they know that I am very particular about picking up the phone and calling and wishing, especially, birthdays in birth and in death. Pick up the phone and call. And it's also a good opportunity to reconnect, I feel. And that was when I realized that phone calls are actually free. Those days,
Which
phone
way?
calls, WhatsApp, right?
Hmm. Right, in that way.
Yeah, WhatsApp or your Messenger or even LinkedIn, you can make a video call or phone calls are free. Those were the days where phone calls used to cost a lot, and so you used to write letters and letters and letters. So as things have become free, it's like we're not communicating and we're not talking. So that's my personal tip. Sometimes just pick up the phone, and it's so nice, and it's so nice to reconnect and hear people's voices, and either hear the joy or hear the sorrow in them.
Yeah, I recognize that when you say, especially the money. I do remember, well, with my very first girlfriend, I was like, indeed, almost daily writing letters and giving it to her and receiving something back. But in the evening, still calling and then still writing a letter because the calling was extremely expensive. I do remember one of the conversations with my parents where the phone bill was, yeah, I had a girlfriend. I think my sister had a boyfriend at that in that month. And both of us, we called, and my parents were also people who called a lot of people. So yeah, there was like an extremely high bill. And these days, yeah, it's not like, well, I think our phone bills with the internet and everything included is much higher, but it's not because of phone calls, because they're like almost cheap. And indeed, uh, well, if I call someone over WhatsApp or don't call, it costs the same amount of money for my internet. So there's definitely a change in prices. And I would say these days, well, for you, and I have the same thing, like a phone connection is really, it feels like an intimate connection. I've noticed that, for example, my daughter, she's using a lot more video calls. That she's like she's sending video chats. So basically, in the morning, she gets like a 5 second video from her friend. She sends a 5 second video back, and it's like sending back and forth messages like I used to send text messages. Like throw away, I don't gather. I keep my text messages, and she does the same thing with video calls. Is that something you recognize? Is that for you? Is a video call more personal than a phone call, or how is that for you?
I don't know. I guess it depends on the situation or what you want to talk about or what has happened. I guess a phone call is a lot more scheduled. It's intentional. That's back and forth. You save what you want to talk about, and then you talk about it there. Whereas voice messages are just they're fine as well. It goes back and forth, and it's sometimes easier, and sometimes you use speech to text. And I know sometimes we're in meetings and we need to say something, and I can't. And sometimes I have people sending me voice messages, and I'm like, I'm in a 3-hour meeting. I can't be listening to this,
Exactly.
and that does make it tricky. But Yves, you were talking about your first girlfriend and letters and all, and that reminded me of my friend who at night at 7 o'clock at night say come at the door and chap on the door and say, Vinny, let's just go to the park for a walk, and they carry their stool to sit in the payphone so that they could make a phone call. So they couldn't stand for long to just sit there with the stool and sit for like hours while I was just the person that just came along, so it wasn't obvious. And I just used to go walk around the park with the dog, and while they would just sit down with the and put coins, just keep chucking coins in. And I do miss those days. I miss the days when the newspaper used to come, and I will run for the newspapers and see what's in the cinema and circle things, or TV, this is what I'm going to watch and this is what I'm going to watch. I remember I had like a red color pencil and I used to circle that. I do miss those good old days where we were thought to be patient.
Well, the pain phone for me was like, I do remember studying, and well, in the place where I was staying, we didn't have a phone, so I needed to go out to go for a pay phone. And indeed, there was, and because it's a university city, there's lots of students all queuing up for calling someone. And I do remember like waiting for half an hour, finally, or to the phone, you call someone, and then and either nobody picks up, and that was kind of okay. And what was worse is that a parent picks up and then says, "Oh, this or that person that you tried to reach is not home," and then I've lost my money, and then then I still haven't talked to that person. So that was even worse. Like today, everybody has their phone in their pocket. If you can't reach them, it's because they're busy, like you're saying. And there is a way to text and say, okay, maybe that's a moment to call. So that's definitely. Yeah, I really love that. And for me, phones, um, I like to use phones indeed a lot, like you say, to get the meaningful connections, much more than to practical stuff, because a lot of practical stuff for me works a lot more in chat messages, because then I can look things up. I have a record of what we agreed. Um, yeah, just a couple of years ago, I had a good conversation with a person, and we discussed a lot about how we would do a workshop. And that was on the phone, and so that's how old it was. We didn't have video phones at that moment, and later I realized like I didn't actually take any notes, so now I had to find back again what we did agree on how we would do the workshop. If we would have done it with text messages, I would have been able to go back and see what did we agree on. But for me, the phone is really the connection part. That's what you're
Yeah,
talking about. It's the
yeah.
stories we share, and that's
And
is
I
that important.
don't and I don't know if you used to run when the house phone used to ring, you'd run to see who can get it because you're just so excited who would ring.
Yeah,
I
and because you well, I was thinking, of course, this is for me, and maybe my sister was saying the same thing, and maybe my mother or my father were expecting someone else to call. It's like, yeah, or just a thing indeed, and like, and because at that moment you didn't know who called. Now on your phone you already see, okay, it's this or that person. And if it's I record all the numbers that call me, so unknown numbers, I will still save them, and I add, okay, this is a recruiter, this is a sales annoying salesman, this is actually, I don't know, an accountant or whatever. So I would know, okay, this is again that salesperson that's tried to sell me once a year, whatever. I'm not going to pick up, or probably will already be blocked. But then I can see who that is, because that's the other thing. 2024, I don't remember any phone numbers anymore. It's
I
like
was
I
going
still
to ask you that. Do you still remember your first home phone number?
The first phone number at home, I kind of know it, but at some point in Belgium, we switched phone numbers to, so they added a digit, and so
Mhm.
that is where I'm a little bit confused about that number. But it was 51 40 89. I will check later on with my parents if it's still the correct one, but
Yeah,
that's the one I think
yeah.
that it is. But for example, the cell phone number of my partner, we've been together for 28 years. She had the first two times, three times, no, the first two times that she had a cell phone number, she didn't use it that often, so she let it expire. So people could would call her and she would pick up, but she wouldn't call herself. And the way that contract was made, if you don't make any calls yourself, that contract expires after 6 months. So that happened twice, and that's first phone number I knew by heart. That second was already harder, and now it's probably like more than 20, I don't know, 20 or 15 years, that same third phone number. And I will recognize it when I see it written down, but I won't be able to write it down myself. Maybe now halfly, but no, not really enough. It's like it's annoying. Um, the phones just tell me who it is, and I don't see the numbers anymore.
One of the things we actually forget is we are losing the capability to remember things. And I have a pretty good memory, touch wood. And I know people that I've worked with because they know that I can actually repeat things or repeat incidents, or I can actually tell you exactly what has happened. And sometimes they go like, okay, what she says. And I used to remember every single phone number in the Rolodex. I could remember that. And that whenever people ask me, what is your superpower? I always say my memory. I can remember really weird things from like ages ago. And I know nowadays that we're not made to remember things like phone numbers and things like that. I think like it's a muscle, and I'm losing that capacity, but I still can remember incidents, conversations, who said what happened. Um, and
That's
sometimes
much more interesting to remember than phone numbers, right?
yeah. And I guess I keep training myself. If I find the middle ground, if it's work and things like that, I will write it down so that's a record. But I don't sometimes write stuff down personally at home just so that I can remember what I need to do, because I don't have the phone numbers to remember anymore. But you need to call your parents and check whether that number is still the same.
And to hear with them. Okay, let's move to that next question about remote. What have you learned about remote work?
Well, it definitely can be done. It
Hmm.
it can be done. And the truth is, I've been actually working remotely before remote working became a mainstream thing in pandemic. And during pandemic, a lot of people actually said that, oh, it's bad for mental health. We want you all back in the office, blah, 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 blah. No, it was not bad for mental health, because during COVID, we were not allowed to go out at all.
Exactly. That was the
Wasn't
bad
allowed about
remote.
being going out for work. We were not allowed to go. And it seemed that has latched on and become a propaganda. And I want to draw the distinction between going out and going to work. So it can be done. And I was actually working 3 months in Australia and 3 months in the UK. And I used to work remotely in Australia across different time zones, even before pandemic. So 100%, I've been actually doing this before it even became a thing. And, with companies to say, oh, you need to come back to work and go back to work. And like, oh, we want to look after you. It's like, okay, great. I've got a manager. They care about me. They want to look after you. But, people come and people go. Different managers come, different managers go. A lot of offices, they're all centralized in cities. And then who's going to help populate the economy and, the other areas that are not cities? That's a question as well, right? It's got to do with affordability and livability, I guess. But also, all the good people don't live in the same postcode. If you want talent and diversity, we all don't live in the same postcode, right?
Well,
And
and if we did, then we were limited to the number of people. Yeah.
can you imagine if all of us actually lived in the same postcode?
Mhm.
That
Exactly.
Yeah. So for me, it's all about the balance, right? And it's about purposeful and meaningful interactions, as you mentioned. Options. We have different lives. Public transport costs a lot, and most time it does not work. The UK is notoriously known for trains not working and notoriously known for having extremely expensive train tickets. They are so expensive, it is ridiculous. I remember paying like £200 once to go to a client from Edinburgh to England in the Midlands, and it cost me £250. And the train was late. People get stressed. In Edinburgh last week, I saw that there is a bus that does not want to go in a certain area because it's not safe, because something had happened there. Not very nice things. But can you imagine if you lived there and you just need to get to work until we
And
kind of
now there is no bus anymore, and typically in these less safe areas, well, people might have less money and that might not have a car, or might have chosen to say, I don't want to have a car because there's always a bus, and all of a sudden, the
yeah.
bus no longer stops there.
Yeah. And I guess, with trains that don't work all the time, and I know I've got a lot of friends in the German Agile community, and they will also tell you that their ban is just always just not work, and it's not working. And it's the same in the UK. It's just not great. But then also, we all have our lives. And I guess when you also say, what have I also learned about remote working, is I've learned a lot, and I've had an insight into people's lives, things that people usually would not have shared before the pandemic. Kids, age parents, all these things that may require people to actually be at home, or be available. And we had that empathy, and then suddenly it's kind of disappearing, and there's a huge return to office mandate, when before that you tell us, you all need to work from home, we all need to work because we work for companies and businesses, and we can do it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh no, it's not happening. It's just basically playing chess with people. So I guess do what's best for you, what's right for you. There's no right and wrong. But if you are going to be in the office, and I've been there, like hundreds of people disturbing you, people talking, and I'm the kind of person that I need quiet to think. But then I've also gone to work just to show face to I don't know who, nobody. And I always call it a catwalk. It's like, oh, I'll just go one round and I'll come back. Oh, well, there's nobody there. And you'd spend all your time traveling and getting ready, and there's nobody. So make it intentional, right? Get people and say, okay, we're coming together for this time. Can we all be there? But I also acknowledge that, with some people, they might not have setups that might make it easy for them to work from homes. And I know with these people, they go to co-working spaces. And I tell you, Yves, these co-working spaces, so I belong to one as well. And they're quite cool. They're quite cool. They do things on a Friday for their people, and you actually have a very diverse people from all around the world come together, and they hang out. So, and this doesn't mean, like I said, do what's best for your situation, but also remember that your situation can change as well.
That's the thing, is that what is interesting is that some of these managers are setting the rules because it works for them in their situation, but they don't think about everybody else who's living and what their situations are, on where they are. And it doesn't matter if it's about going to work or not being allowed to go to work, and all these sub kind of things. And it's most interesting or strange or bad is actually they're changing the rules part of the game. I mean, I can decide to go for a company that says we're only working remote, and that might be perfectly for me in my current time. And then, I don't know, 2 months later, they might say, well, actually, we changed this. Like, yeah, well, I dropped another possibility because I was allowed to do this. So that might be an important part. And I'm one of the lucky people that, yeah, I can work in both ways. I can find to make it work, but I might choose for whatever for a certain reason. But it's a choice. And there are people, like you said, who have disabilities, who have other things in their life where it's not a choice, and then it's really becoming an annoying thing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is there
No,
something you want to add about this?
Well, yes, very very quickly. I mean, when I look at going to the office, don't get me wrong, I like going to the office. I like seeing my friends, but in Sydney, it was tough. It was tough because the public transportation system was not great. And although I could see the Harbour Bridge from where I lived, I had to wait for 3 buses before I could get on a bus. And they don't have bus stops or bus shelters there, and it's torrential rain there, and I go to work, I'm all wet, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, and these were some of the memories that I have. And you talk about people changing the rules and things like that. I have friends in this situation where their contract clearly says working from home, and now they have to go to work, and even though they have the contract and they can stand by it, but they're being made to feel bad. They are being made to feel bad.
Action. Okay, let's see. And there you're back.
Yes, yeah. So
So you were talking about your friends who are made feel bad because they have a contract that says you can work from home and
and
rules have changed. Now you have to come to the office.
yeah,
Wow.
and they're 3 hours drive away, and it's not great. And just to wrap up on this topic, is whenever I said, okay, we have to come to work, and I said, I don't mind, like, make it intentional for me, because in Edinburgh, that there's not a lot of things going on, there's not a lot of work going on, and it's quite expensive to live there. The city's just gotten so much more expensive. um I don't mind coming for a whole week in a month. That's a lot better for me. And it's more intentional. But what I was saying is, with these things, when you say, okay, who said this? Where did this rule come from? Who is saying this? I have never got a single answer. And I don't know if it's the same with you. Where did this come from?
Well, I did get sometimes answers, but I'm not sure if there's always right. Like you say, people think it's better, and there are advantages. I'm not saying that's not true, but a lot of that is also to do with the fact that what I see is that I have learned, just like many others, I have learned some good practices of being in the office. Like, okay, if I want to learn about other people, I can go to the coffee machine and meet and learn people. When I started working, I wasn't drinking any coffee, so I didn't know about that. But then gradually I joined, and later on I learned to drink coffee. But I also learned that, hey, if I'm working in a bigger corporation, it might be interesting to go grab a coffee at a different floor, because there are people that I don't work in my team, but my team works with that team. So it's actually good to drink coffee over there because I get to meet these people that I need to work with, but I don't work on a daily basis. So these are practices I've learned. They don't work anymore remote, and that but we need to find good other practices, and most people haven't learned about these practices yet. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means we have to learn new habits, and some of us know already some habits and others have never learned it, and we need to find more of these habits.
Yeah. Some
And
some of some of my best friends, my best connections, closest connections, the people that have helped me a lot, were actually people that I have never met. And they are the people that will be the first people to help me. For example, when I left Australia, I had, to get the bond money back, the deposit and things like that. Smita, she lives in Canberra. And then I had a really close friendship with Justin and Belinda, and they worked in Metcash, and I've never met them. And we are still in touch until today.
that's a little bit what yeah. Well, just here this conversation, we have never met, and we're already been talking for close to 2 hours, so that already shows that we're able to have that kind of connection. So that's is indeed for me one of the things that it shows. If we can make the time, we can actually learn and get to know each other. So I want to move to that next question about what's a book that you have read? And I know that you had 2 books you wanted to show, so let's let's bring on. And I noticed that my other screen has turned off, so I'll turn it on now. So, what's a book that you want to talk about?
Well, so when I was young, I read a lot. In fact, somebody actually said they didn't even know what my face looked like because I always had a book in front of me.
Right.
I had really huge glasses, and I was always reading, and I just lived in, I I just love to just be in my room and just read and not talk to anybody. And then I think recently I've not been reading very much, and I only seem to be able to read when I go on holiday. And when I go on holiday, I tend to not want to read anything about work because I want a break. I don't want I don't want to be thinking. I just fully cut everything off. So the last book I actually read was Sandwich by Catherine Newman. And this book was recommended quite highly amongst people, but also I was told that, you either love it or you either hate it. The book was okay. Um, I wouldn't say I absolutely loved it. It was okay. I guess, the writer and the story was at a different path in their lives, and I was at a different path in my life. So yeah, that's the story about that book.
Right, and that's it's a very strange name for a book, but definitely it's intriguing at least to say. And like you say, sometimes, especially with fiction, with sometimes, yeah, we need to be feel at the right moment for a certain book. I recognize I've read a lot of books when I was young, and sometimes some of the books didn't fit, and now they might fit better. So I recognize that. And you had another book which was then more work related. What's that book that you wanted to bring up?
Yes, that's Empowered Agile Transformation Beyond the Framework, and that is by a now friend of mine, a fellow Australian, Alexander Stokes. She gifted me this book in Agile Alliance and European Hub in Manchester, where we both finally met. Again, we're both Australians. She lives in Melbourne. I lived in Sydney and Perth, and it took us to meet in Manchester. And I'm reading the book. I know, I'm reading the book slowly and surely because I want to really take it in, write my notes, and it's formatted really well. My friend Bevan, really good friend Bevan Williams, I believe you interviewed him as well. He was also gifted the book, and even with his kids, he's finished the book even before me.
Yeah, for me, doesn't yeah, the time that we have actually I learn every week about another book or two books like today. And yeah, it's a lot harder to read books. I'm actually working on two books that people have sent me that are not published, and I'm really behind on making sure I can give some feedback. Which is sorry because yeah, these are people I really admire and want to help out, but sometimes it's harder. And even though at this moment I actually have a lot more time, or I thought I would have a lot more time, but life gets in the way. So yeah, that's a little bit how things are, of course. But thanks for sharing that, because it's not the first person that talks about Alexandra's book. Can't come up with the name who said it, but before, but I had when I added this picture to this presentation, I was like, oh, I've actually seen this picture already. So I know someone else talked about it already. So two people talking about the same book must be something to actually be interested to read. So let's move to, for me, one of the most interesting questions, like, what's the question do you think that I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I guess it's like what's on my mind now, right? What's the hot topic? And I guess the question is, do you think it matters if organizations should recruit from a wide range of people? And obviously it's yes, because I talk a lot about DEI, B, and I'm a supporter of it. But going beyond, what was said, I think it's really important for companies. Some companies, they only want to hire people from the same industry. And once a company only wanted to hire somebody from the same state. This is so bizarre, right? And they said that they would rather have somebody from the same state with no experience or almost no experience than somebody from another state with, more experience. And I feel that that's a very limiting way of hiring because it ensures that you're going
What's
to,
the what's
sorry.
the idea? What's the idea behind it? What was the excuse that that person was using?
I don't know.
Because
They said that's what they want. They just want somebody from the same area, from the same state, and that's what they want. And they said, we'd rather have somebody with little or no experience than somebody with experience, and that's just how it is. Because bear in mind, Yves, I have lived and worked in different countries, and so different countries they think differently, and different states have different ways. So you have like countries, states, and then cities, and how people operate. And I think it's just very limiting because it's ensuring that you're going to limit the diversity through experience and ways of thinking. I think you really need to go beyond that. You just people always say, "Oh, I want somebody in the same industry. Everybody needs to be this industry and that industry." Well, at the start, I mentioned all the industries I've worked in. I've basically worked in a lot of industries. So if that was a criteria for success, then how was I successful in those industries? Right? I've gone to automotive, gone financial services, retail, government, education, mining. It's not great, and people do that. And sometimes it's not people. It's not the people that is doing it. It's the client that wants it. It's how maybe to get the best person, best job, the best tender. That's what they want. Don't don't do that, because people from the same industry most likely going to think exactly like you. They are not going to bring fresh ideas, fresh opinions. Similarly to why we should hire and support remote working, because that's when you get diversity. That's when you get a different way of thinking, different ideas.
that feels very much like I can understand that people think, okay, if the first part where you said only from our state without experience, I don't. This part where if you know our industry, it might bring some value. I can see that, but sometimes indeed, especially for externals, when we bring value with our experience, we can say, well, your industry might be a little bit different, but in that industry, we solve this kind of way, and it actually make you look outside your boxes, outside your boundaries, and you learn. And it might still not be okay. That's fine. That might indeed be. But I've had much more that people really try, like, hey, okay, I never thought about it because my industry is different, but actually that sounds like a good idea, or let's at least experiment and try with it. So yeah, I
It's
join you in that.
happening. It's still happening today. It's still happening last week. It's going to continue to happen, sadly. And even when you hire different people, you don't just hire everybody from the same employment type. Whether it's agile or not agile doesn't really matter. You should hire different types of employment, because if you hire somebody that's permanent, they're most likely be in one company for 10 years, and then okay, they're moving for another company for another years. But if you hire different types of employments, then you have different mix of people, and then we can learn from each other. It's all about learning from each other, and it's creating that that sustainable employment workforce, or dealing with those kind of scenarios. I feel that's how we can create meaningful change. Just having one way, one type of employment, everybody, lives in the same postcode. I kind of feel sometimes that we're regressing.
Yeah, I recognize that, and it's yeah, definitely some things to think about. So really wonderful question and really wonderful answer. That's really thing. And now we're going to that very last question, but it's a question that I know you have lots of answers to. So I'm really looking forward to that. So who do you think I should ask next? And when we were in contact, you sent me a big list and said, "Is it okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's definitely fine."
Yeah.
I really love it. So because I put the names, I put the pictures, I'm going to turn it around a little bit, because for me it's hard sometimes to know when you say a person what's the picture. So I'm going to show a picture, and then hopefully I have the right pictures. But
Yes.
you tell me the people that you think, well, why you wanted to invite them.
Yeah, just a bit of background before you and I, Yves, we met under very interesting circumstances, right? We were connected under very interesting circumstances, and we were both we bonded by that same experience and that same shared goals. And I look at our industry and our community, and sometimes I do think that we're an echo chamber. We need to think about sustainability in terms of the younger generation, and there are other people out there. Personally, I was not visible in the community. Like I said, I've been doing this for many years. It's only in the last 4 years that I started to come out of my shell and be visible. And a lot of that was because I didn't see myself in anybody out there in the industry. And so I thought if I couldn't see myself out there, then, I better toughen up and, see if, I can do it. And when you're outside, it's really a strange experience. And I know a lot of these people that I'm going to say their names are a lot of mix of different reasons for that you and I met as well. And I don't know if a lot of them will take up your offer. And I know some of them might just kill me as well. But I think these names, they need to be said because they are doing work and they're doing good work. And if they ever come to interview, I know that their first experience will be with you. And I know that they will love it and they will enjoy it because there's something really nice about you. And there's something really nice about your show and how you treat your guests.
Really wonderful. And I want to add my part to a little bit as well, is that in the sense that, yes, who's agile? When I first launched it in the book version, some people thought, oh, I might not belong because it should only be the big names. And I was like, no, my goal is actually almost the opposite. It's like I want to give a very diverse view, a lot, and yes, there are big names. There are people who've signed the Agile Manifesto and created it and things like that. And of course, that attracts more viewers and everything. But it's not just, and they are always very interesting people to learn and to really learn about what triggered them. And then we realize that, hey, they're just not a brand. They're also people behind. That's why I want to show them. But I also indeed want to show the people that might not be known outside their own team, working in a small little corner. And for me, it's perfectly fine. I've invited now more than 300 people. I think about or 400. I don't know. I should look at the latest numbers, but not. I think only 2/3 of the people that I invite accept. So there's a big list of people either not replying or just saying. I think there's only 17 people so far who said no. There's a lot of other people who never replied, or I have to do a little bit more work.
Yeah.
But I do hope indeed to invite much more
Yeah.
people that are lesser known. And this is why I was so glad when you sent a list of people, and some I've known before, names that rung a bell, and a lot of others are not. So let's look
Yeah.
at that
I was
list.
like Santa Claus making a list for a whole month. I had this list. All right, let's go.
So this is the very first person.
Yeah.
Who's
So
this person?
so this is Nethra, and she is an amazing agilist. And she's worked in the automotive industry across 2 different companies. She really knows her stuff and she is confident. And I love that about her.
That helps a lot in our industry, especially if you want to do change. That, of course, if you say, well, if I'm not confident, and I don't like people who are overconfident, like it, this is the old, but that's not what I'm hearing. But the opposite is sometimes even worse. We try to help people to change something, and like if we're totally not well, if we're very insecure, then our customers will start to wonder as well. So definitely that is helpful. Let's move to that second person. Who is this and why are you inviting her?
Okay, this person, she has to come. It's like you really have to badger her to come to be interviewed. She is amazing, and we were friends in Perth when I was working in Perth. And
Wait, you haven't mentioned her name yet. So
her name is
first start.
Hazel. Her name is Hazel Antonio Walsh. And I was the agile coach and she was the scrum master, but she didn't realize that she was actually my coach. And what I love about her
Wow.
is she will tell it as it is. She is brave. In my house, we nickname her Brave. She
Wow.
holds to her values, and she doesn't care who you are. She will just say, this is right, this is not right, this doesn't align with my values. I She is a true inspiration to me. And she is back in Ireland on you get, if you work in Australia for 10 years as permanent employee, you get 1 year holiday. So she's doing that. She's back in Ireland with her family. So, yeah.
This
Okay, so this is Suzanne, and Suzanne and I have been working together in the current client that we're on, but we're also together in outcome over output that we started together. I like Suzanne because she is an extremely strong agilist who really knows her stuff. She is a she's a software developer. She's a degree in IT quite a while ago, and I like to look up to her. She's got a lot more experience than me, and she's authentic. She does her work. She's ethical, and the both of us work really well together. And I believe that people who like to work well together, should work well together, and we're able to have a laugh. So there you go.
which is also very important, of course.
Yes.
Let's move to that next person. The picture is not that clear, but that's the one I found on LinkedIn. Do you know who this is? And I hope again that I have the right person.
I am trying to look that up. I'm not sure if that is the correct photo, but I'm guessing it should be Divya Bansal. I'm not sure if that's a LinkedIn photo, and apologies, I
It
should have.
is.
Yeah.
It is a picture of indeed Divya Bansal, but of course there might be multiple ones. That's the
Maybe,
risk of
yeah. I don't know
not
if we get
showing it.
I don't know if we get the right photo, but I was Divya's one of those people that I was in Perth and she was in Sydney, and we were working remotely, and she she's really good at what she does. She's confident. She's a go-getter. She knew that she wanted to become a Scrum Master, and she really made that happen. And she she's inspiring because she helps me want more, for myself and for everybody as well.
I just found a different Divya, so might be the
Yeah,
wrong person.
I
But
think
this one is having, yeah, has a lot more. So the picture I'm having here, it has a lot more. How would I say it? A lot more agile experience. So that's why I still think it might be the right person, but maybe
okay. Maybe
a
to look
less
at this.
recognized
Yeah,
picture.
we
But
work.
we can see it later on, and then
Yes.
we can. So let's move to that next person. Who's
Ah,
this?
this one. That's Charlie. That's Charlie, and she's from South Africa. And a lot of this young females that have actually given you the names, these are people that actually have confidence. These are people that I wish that when I was their age I had that confidence. And she's doing a lot of good things in the industry. I believe she is leading the South African SAGSA, South African user group. And we did actually like say hi to each other when we were in South Africa, but we didn't really actually connect. And it's only in the last few months that we've started chatting and talking about things. And she's she's doing a lot of good things, and I think you even can see her personality is there. She's recently got married, so if you're listening to this, congratulations. And like I said with the list, I was very intentional. And this is someone from the younger generation that is upcoming. This will be our future.
That's indeed why I like so much this list, because it's for me, it's like I said, it's not, well, the big agile names, it sounds negative, but in a way they're like the people from the past because they've created it, and I don't say it in a negative way. But these people, and that's really meant in a positive way, are the future of Agile, because that is where things are moving. So that's why it's extremely important. Okay, let's have another picture here. Who's this?
Yeah, so this is Maria Felsetti as well. And again, a lot of these names that I've given you, I don't really know them very well. And I have had one or two interactions with them, but I do think that they should be on the show, and they they should start now. They shouldn't wait like me, who started a lot later. Maria is somebody that had invited me to write something for the Agile blog, and then we had a quick call, and I got to find out about her and her life, and how she moved from South America to Amsterdam. And it's really interesting that how she became a Scrum Master, and I think you will really enjoy talking to her. And she is also our next generation.
The other people in some of the next ones, because I also feel like a lot younger people. Well, younger, everybody is young compared to me, I would say. No, not true. Linda Rising was here as well. She's almost 30 years older, so that still is a difference. Who's this, and why should I bring her on the show?
Okay, so if you could show the three photos together, that would be great.
Not together, but I can
Yeah,
definitely
one
show.
after another. Yeah.
Yeah, one after another. So let me. So I
Yeah.
think this is Zaima,
Yeah. So
and
there's
this is Iman, if I'm
Iman.
thinking correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
this should be that.
Rabab.
Yeah, I didn't write the name down here.
Rabab. Yeah. So these three young, well, these lovely ladies I met at Agile Prague.
Hmm.
And, we had a
Um,
20-minute conversation, and I was so happy to see them. And I said, wow, ladies, it's so nice to see you in Prague. And they're from Oman,
mhm.
and they're from oil and gas, and they went Agile Prague. And, I think that I given you these names so that, who is Agile can go to the other side of the globe. And I
Well,
did.
there is actually people also from Australia. There's people from India already here, from Pakistan, so a couple of other. But actually, in many cases, there's some of these countries. There's just one or two people, and it would be nice because right now, like I think Berlin, we have already 4 or 5, and so in the UK and US, we have a lot more people. Africa, luckily, I've already found some more, but indeed there are parts of the world where there's not enough people there yet, and I am really happy that we can change that. But the end of the world, well, the end of the world, the other part of the world, sorry, there is. We can also go back because you also gave me another name that actually was already on my list, but I'm really happy that you could invite her. So who's this?
That's Evelyn. Evelyn, I
Mhm.
met in Agile Prague, and I know both of us are actually quite passionate about females and their voice in the industry.
Yeah, and like I said, she was already on my list, and I was really eager to invite her. And so I'm really happy that someone invites her, that we can have that conversation. So that's really wonderful. Um, yeah, Vinny, we've been talking more than 2 hours now. Well, I don't know exactly because we had our pre-talk
Chit-chat.
before, but so I'm not sure how long we've actually been recording on the show. But it's been a wonderful conversation for me. I really enjoyed the time we had, and
Me too.
if it wouldn't be 4 o'clock, I wouldn't know that we've been talking for more than 2 hours, because it really felt like very fluent, except for the little hiccup we had in the beginning with the sound, which luckily we were able to fix rather quickly. If people want to connect with you, what would be a good way to connect with you?
LinkedIn, of course. LinkedIn.
And that, I think, should be your connection contacts, if I'm correct.
That's correct. Yeah. Send me a message, and I will reply. I do have like a separate life, between work and my personal life. We talked about phones and connections and things like that, but I will reply. And if I don't, just send me another message. I'm pretty good at it.
you say that because we did connect, and like you say, there were some. Well, we met on LinkedIn in a kind of strange way on things. I don't think we need to go into detail here, but it was interesting that indeed we with that we got very quickly connected, and
Yeah.
then it took us some time to find mutual time in our agendas because both of us we were
Yeah.
rather busy. But here we are at halfway November, and I'm really glad that we took the time. So thank you very much for that conversation. It was as good as I was hoping it would be. And yeah, I'm really happy that we took the time here today.
Yes. Thank you. I guess we went down a trip, from memory lane, from like childhood and phone books and public phones, and until where we are today. I just want to say thank you for having me. I Doing this podcast with you was something that I had to do before the year ended. It was on my Kanban, and I kept messaging. I was like, I haven't forgotten. But I just want to say, like, basis on how we connected and what transpired, I really have a lot of admiration for what you're doing and the stance that you are doing and the voice that you bring to those people that maybe don't have a voice or are scared to do that. I truly appreciate and value you on that context, and I think you and I both know what we're talking about.
It's I don't fully agree that they don't have a voice, but they're
For the
sometimes
people
don't.
that don't have a voice,
No,
I
no,
think
but
it was
I do
strong
think
for
that
us.
some of these people have a voice, but the world, like sometimes on LinkedIn or other places, are dangerous for them to use a voice if there's not other people who are
Yeah.
supporting for them. And in that sense, I fully recognize that they might feel that they don't have a voice, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do: give more of these people a voice that shows that, like, hey, your voice is incredibly important to hear. And I also, to be completely transparent, I always learn a lot from these kind of conversations. Just like today, I already know that when I will look back at these conversations, there will be things that I will write down, and I will say, like, hey, okay, this is what I want to take away from that conversation. This is what I've learned. And I'm pretty sure that even, and that's for me is, I think Linda Rising said it like, what keeps her young is keep connecting to the younger generations, because she learned so much things from younger people, and that's exactly what I'm hoping to do with inviting them. It's not just being charitable and giving them a platform, but it's also learning from them. It's not just pure charity. That's the, I don't know. Yeah, that's also in it for me. There is learning in it for me, because I very much know that these people who don't get often a chance to have a voice actually are some of the most interesting things to learn. A person that has been speaking out a lot, sometimes they say the whole same things over and over again, and I might have heard it already. And the younger generation, they think in a different way, they act in a different way, they have very different experiences. Then this is what I want to learn to keep myself young, even if it's only for that.
But you
And
are young, Eves, young at heart. We all are young at
I well, I'm young at heart. I think, just like Linda says, by keep talking to young people, that's what's keeping me young. And yeah, my 17-year-old daughter might disagree when I call myself young, even young at heart. She'll be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But because I indeed sometimes feel I'm still 24, but having a son of 22, that means that it's impossible that I'm 24. But in my mind, I still want to be that age. That's for sure. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Let's call it a day. I will really happy to have this conversation, and I indeed will invite all these lovely people. And afterwards, we'll double check with that one person if that was indeed the right person or not, and then we'll figure that one out later. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of Agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other Agilists.